To say that joining me on the Godcast today is former professional footballer Phil Cavener. Phil, it's great to get you on the Godcast. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Nice sunny day in Bedford here.
Yeah, fabulous. As we record this before, just we get to December, it's weather's not too bad. Anyway, Phil, it's great to get you on, and we were talking briefly off camera before we set this up. Was that you said that you weren't particularly a religious guy growing up, but you used to have this thing about sleeping with a football and kind of praying for something. Just tell us a bit about
Yeah, I did like always as a young child. I always slept with the football, and I used to always pray to God to look after my family and make me a professional footballer.
that. Was that a realistic dream? You know, were you talented from a really young age with the football?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I was always sort of. We emigrated to Australia when I was 10, and then I played. I played a lot in. We were in Perth, and I was chosen through the years for like the under 10s, Western Australia 11s, 12s. And even at that time, again, I used to still, sleep with the football and still say prayers even then.
And you say there, Phil, that you were out in Australia. So just share with people who'll be watching and listening to this how you ended up in Burnley. How did that all come about?
Well, I was playing. Obviously, we won the national championship in Australia. So basically, every year, every state picks a national team, and Western Australia had never won the national competition, and we won it 2 years in a row. Um, and then my coach at the time, his best friend was Sammy Nelson, the Arsenal player, who was still then. This would have been about 1975, 76, and Arsenal came to watch me in Australia. My coach recommended to Sammy Nelson that they come and watch me in Australia. So they came and watched me, and then 1976, I was fit. You can leave. I could leave school at 15 in Australia. So I came back with my dad, and we went to the training ground and the old Highbury. And then all of a sudden, Bertie Mee got the sack, and then Terry Neal took over. So they said to me and my dad, go back to sort of where you were sort of brought up, which is obviously the northeast of England. And at 15, I joined the Wallsend Boys Club, and Arsenal said they would come and watch me again in England. And but before they actually came and watched me, Burnley watched me and took me to Burnley when I was 15, and they were then in the old first division at the time. So I basically signed for them at 15, but I had to go back to school because you couldn't leave till you were 16 in Australia. So, but I used to get in trouble all the time because I wasn't very good at school, and I used to just not go to school and go and train with the apprentices at Burnley. And I'd had a few calls from the chief scout or the manager saying, Phil, I've had a call from the school. You didn't go to school today. And it was like, well, what's the point? I can't do anything. And that was the start of the journey, really.
Who were some of those pivotal coaches at Burnley, Phil, in those early days in your development as a young player?
Well, Harry Potts was the chief scout who became then a manager at Burnley, and he used to pick me up. He had an old Rover, and he used to pick me up from Todmorden because if he could go from Newcastle to Todmorden, and Todmorden wasn't far from Burnley, so he used to pick me up with his wife and his old Rover. And then at that time there was and Mike Summerby was there, Paul Fletcher, Leighton James, Brian Flynn, Keith Newton was right back, who played in the World Cup with his brother Henry. Alan Stevenson was goal, Martin Dobson, and then over the next few years there was Mickey Phelan came into the side, Trevor Stephen came into the side, um, Lee Dixon. I played with Lee. He was at Burnley, and then he got released. And then when I went to Northampton, he went, I think, to Chester. And then I used to play against him. And then the next thing, he went from Chester to Stoke, Stoke to Arsenal, Arsenal to England. So there was some good.
Mm.
And then your managers was like Frank Casper, um, Keith, Brian Miller. So yeah, it was good. It was a. I mean, at that time, Burnley had probably the best training ground in the country, next to probably Everton. Because as a kid, you'd play in the juniors, the reserves, so you played all the training grounds, and ours was classed. Gawthorpe was classed then, even then, sort of in the late '70s, was like the best training ground.
You've Phil, you've mentioned there some absolute legends of Burnley. Some real, uh, you know, names that will go down in folklore. Martin Dobson, Alan Stevenson. What were you like in that peer group? Were you comfortable? Were you intimidated? How did you take to it?
Well, I lived at one point. I lived in a house. There was about 5 or 6 players living there, and one of the players was Steve Kindon.
Mm.
Now, he was phenomenal, but he was an absolute nutter. And he used to, I can remember Rocky. We went to the pictures, and it was when Rocky was on, when the first movie. And he used to, with us 3 or 4 of apprentices, he took us, and he would sort of practice his punches on us, and we'd get in his car, and he'd just go, right, steer my car, and he'd take his hands off the wheel, and you had to reach over and like steer his car down the road. He was just mad, They were, but it was good because I think I got into the youth side, then I got into the reserves, then I made my debut. I think it would have been about '79 in the old second division, and that was with like you say, all the Brian Flynn's, the Dobsons, the um, uh, Paul Fletcher, Stevenson, Keith Newton. Um, so yeah, it was probably a little bit scary, but I think then at that sort of age, all you wanted to do was play football. Nothing else sort of came into your mind. Um, and it was a good, I should have done better there. I didn't, I did things wrong. Yeah, looking back,
What did you do wrong?
and I think I bought a house. I bought a house. I think when I was just nearly, I think I was about just over 18. And how can now you'd never be able to do that. You can't live on your own at 18. You can't cook. You can't look after yourself. You end up going out more, and then the girls come into the equation. Just things, little things like that. Um, and then I think at one time I could have had the opportunity to talk to Stoke and Queens Park Rangers when I was 18. I got offered a new 2-year contract at Burnley. And it was just the time when I think agents were coming into the country. And this guy said to me, this agent wants to see you. He's got a couple of clubs that want to sign you. But I was happy at Burnley, and I liked everything there. So I didn't pursue it. And I played, with the first season, I think I played nearly every game. And I was sort of the next Leighton James, the next. And then all of a sudden I hit a sort of a poor patch, and I was a winger. And wingers then, you wanted the ball, and if things weren't going right, I just hit a bad sort of patch where I went through a phase where I didn't actually want to play. I didn't actually, I'd wake up on match day and I'd think, I'm not looking forward to it. Whereas the previous seasons, it was, you'd wake up and you couldn't wait to get to the ground, and you couldn't wait. And in those days, it wasn't like now. Your warm ups weren't, like now, with all the warm ups are done. We used to just go out, have a few stretches, kick the ball around, and then off you went. There was no,
Yeah.
and we had one manager, one assistant manager, one physio, and that was it. Whereas now you look at, they've got forward coaches, backward coaches, midfield coaches, keeper coaches. They've got analysts. They've got a friend of mine's just got the job at Wickham. A guy called Dave Hibbert. I knew him through his wife's dad, and I spoke to him on the other night. He was on Sky Sports. He's been at Stoke in the academy, and he's now the set piece coach and striker coach at Wickham. So his only job is to, do set pieces.
Yeah.
There's a lot of obviously clubs I do, and even at the club I'm involved with, our manager, he does a lot of set pieces, to get your goals from. So that's all changed now.
Of course, there
And
was you and there's sports psychologists, aren't there? And they would have probably identified that you weren't feeling. It's sad to hear that you didn't actually fancy the game on a Saturday. Did anybody ever recognize that, or did you just kind of hold it in your mind?
no, nobody. And that's the thing. I think then at that time you were basically, if your form dipped, you were just cast aside, and that was it. Nobody actually sat you down and said, "Look, Phil, you've done fantastic for a couple of seasons. You've been playing great football. All of a sudden now you've hit a dip. Why? How? What can we do about it?" And they didn't do it then. And then it came to a time when I got released. I think it was about 82, and I had a few offers from a couple of clubs in like the third division, fourth division. And then all of a sudden, I got a call from a guy on a boat. He was a football agent, and he said to me, "Do you fancy going out to South Korea?" Or he said Sweden. And I just felt at that time, I think I was I don't know, I was just on a bit of a downer. And I thought, I tell you what, I'll go to Sweden. So the next thing, my tickets come, and I'm off to Sweden.
Incredible. I mean, I think Roger Eli came on, and he ended out. I can't remember if it was India or somewhere. Oh, he ended out some far-flung country, but what was it like that time, Phil? Being effectively being told that Burnley don't want you anymore. Was that, you'd had the highs of joining the club and being successful, and then all of a sudden you get that call into the office, I guess, where they say, actually, we're going to release you.
But yeah, I mean, at the time, I can't really remember the whole thing, but like you say, they don't. It's just a matter of fact, It's just, we don't want you really, so off you go. And that's it. And you've got nobody to really, because my mum and dad then they lived in Newcastle, so you didn't have any support really around you. You had a couple of your mates, but most players sort of came and went. Like after Sweden, I signed for Gillingham. So you go there. So all of a sudden you've gone from Lancashire to Kent, and then the next thing you go from Kent to, I think then I had a few loan spells, and then I went to Northampton Town. I signed for Northampton Town when Tony Barton was the manager, the old Villa. He rang me and he watched me when I was at Burnley about signing for Villa, but he didn't actually think I was good enough to play in the first division. But he signed me for Northampton Town, and he was a good guy. He sadly passed away. But yeah, he was a proper old fashioned manager.
Phil, just talk a bit about the psychology of that. I mean, I've spoke to lots of professional ex-pros on the Godcast, and they sound quite pragmatic. That you are a commodity in many ways, and you become somebody else's kind of. You go to where the contract is. Were you comfortable with that, or did that affect you mentally in any way, or?
No, I don't think so. I think because you were still playing football. I think it's just you just got on with it really. And because, like you say, you move around, you don't form, great friendships because you're only, say, at a club for 2 years, 3 years, so you form friendships at the time. But, I've still got a couple of, good friends that played the game who I still see today. And then obviously, because obviously I had my car crash when I was 25. That was the end of that. That finished my football.
Are you happy to say a bit about that, or?
Yeah. No, it was funny because I got offered. I went down to Southend to see Dave Webb, and I got offered a 2-year contract there. And then I got offered a contract, I think it was somewhere like Darlington, and and then all of a sudden, um, I'd started a business. I was 25. I started a business. I opened a health club. Because I was always thinking after football, because then the money was okay, but it was never going to set you up like it does now. So all of a sudden, I got a call from Dave Needham, the old Forest player, who was manager at Kettering Town. So I was living in Sandy, so Kettering's only probably about 40 minutes away. So he offered me a 2-year contract, and the money was good, just to train twice a week, semi-pro. And I thought, you know what? I'm just opening the health club. Football's not going to last forever. So I signed for Kettering, and I started. Then Dave Needham got the sack, and then Alan Buckley took over. And I played against Alan when he was at Walsall and different clubs. And I was playing the best football I'd played since I was very young, when I was sort of really on form. And he actually wrote a piece in the newspaper saying that he couldn't believe that I wasn't in the England non-league side. And he said he basically accused the scouts of not coming south to watch southern-based players, because most of the squad was northern-based. And then we got to the final of what was the equivalent, and Alan was brilliant because I was a winger, and at home he never ever wanted me in my own half. He said, your job's from there to there. Whereas as time went on, you became, like now you're a wing back, you're like a right back, you're right sided, you're up and down. And we got to the final of I think it was the old Bob Lord Cup, which it's a bit like the FA Trophy. And we beat Hendon in the final, and I got man of the match. And I can remember I stayed at Billy Kellock's house. He used to play for Luton. And we'd all gone out, we'd been drinking. So we all ended up at his house, about 8 or 9 of us. We just slept on the floor. And I woke up at about 5, 6 o'clock. It was lovely, sunny May morning. And I can remember reversing the car out the drive. And then the next thing, I wake up 6 weeks later. So I've basically got in my car, and I can't remember anything whatsoever of the first 6 weeks I was in hospital. And apparently I think it was 2 miles from home, and I was going south on the A1, and there was a bend, and instead of going round the bend, I drove off. So they said the only thing I could have done was fell asleep, because I hadn't had much sleep. And I can't remember, but I drove down like a dip and into a bridge, into a concrete bridge. And then 6 weeks later, I come around. My mum and my dad took early retirement, and they went to America, and they'd only been there a day because I'd suspected brain damage, which people say was confirmed. And I broke my pelvis in 6 places. I broke my thigh, I broke my hip, I broke my arm, I broke my head. And that was the end of football. So I was in hospital for 8 months. And that was the end of football, really. So I had to then, rehabilitate. And then I had to go back in a couple of years later. I had my right leg rebroken. I had a 6-hour op then. And then 15 years ago, I had to re-break my left arm through problems. But no, I still play tennis and still have a run around a little bit. But then I went in, after that, I had to obviously find a job. I came out of hospital, did all my rehab, and then I always wanted to sell sports equipment. I always thought working for a sports company would be great. So I still had the health club, but it wasn't making any money. And I had a partner, so I basically sold it. I got my money back from that. And then I just started going for interviews, and I got a job selling like space on a wagon, like TNT, just knocking on doors. And then eventually I got into the sports trade, and I worked for sports companies. And then luckily I was at Regatta, an outdoor company, for 15 years. And then I got into football, non-league. And then I'm the vice chairman of a football club now, Arlesey Town in Bedfordshire. But I was 95, 96. I was manager of them when they won the FA Vase at the old Wembley. So I led them out at Wembley in 95, 96. And I'm back there. I've ended back there as vice chairman. So, which is hard. Non-league football, it's great. But even the money in that, even the money, it's crazy in non-league. Now, like you say, any young kid now, you only need one contract. Most of them are signing 3, 4-year, 5-year deals. I mean, we're step 5, and some of the players are on 3, 4, 500 a week. And you're playing in front of crowds and maybe 100, 150. But it's good. We're trying to, me and the chairman are trying to get 3G down and paddle courts in and try to, just to make it survive.
Yeah, I had a guy called, I don't know if you know him, he's called Spencer Gore. He's the owner of Chelmsford City.
Yeah, I've heard the name.
And,
Yeah.
I love all levels of football, Phil. I used to ref at non-league level and I used to love the banter. And, that it's different, isn't it? It's very different to professional football and it's real kind of grounded and honest. But your story is fascinating. You clearly still love football. What is the hope for your club then? Is it to go full time and climb the pyramid?
It's I mean, in an ideal world, we'd like to get 3G down because we've got 2 pitches, so we could put 3G. We're in talks with a paddleboard company to put 7 paddle courts on there. And it's a great setup. It's a conference setup, the club, but it's a village. We're in a village, and we're surrounded by a lot of other clubs. Like we're surrounded by Luton, Stevenage, Stotfold, Hitchin, Baldock, Biggleswade. They're all in sort of like a 10-mile radius, so everybody's fighting for. And they haven't had success for a number of years, but we've got a really good young manager now who saved us from relegation the season before last. We just missed out on the last game of the season for the playoffs. We're now currently, I think we're sitting about joint second, and we were getting better crowds. People are starting to come and watch us. So yeah, I mean, the trouble is we could go up the next league comfortably, but then when you go to your next step, you're then playing teams. You could be going from here to like South Shields. So you've got to have, if you haven't got the money to pay your players, they've got to work. A lot of them can't leave work at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's there's players like in the Conference South and stuff. They're on like £600-700 a week.
Yeah.
So it's we can go. We could probably go a 1 or 2 leagues, but I think we'd like to run. Like you say, the Vase or the FA Cup. Just get through a few rounds of that. But we're out of it now. But there's always next season.
I think it's wise stewardship that you're talking about there, Phil. I mean, I'm sure you'll remember. I remember Cone Dynamos that
Yeah.
and how that all turned out. But just going back to Burnley, Phil, you started by saying that Gawthorpe had one of the best training grounds of its time. I think that's probably true now of even in the country now. I mean, I don't know if you've been to Burnley in recent years, but the Gawthorpe is incredible. It's, I mean, it is amazing. What do you make of Burnley over the last few years?
I'm brilliant because I get invited back once a year if I want to go, and I normally do a bit of a Q&A in one of the bars in the ground. And the last time it was when we had, I think it was at Chelsea. I think it was just before the pandemic. They played Chelsea, and it was when Sean Dyche was there, and Veronica, who does the questions. She's asked me, what's your thoughts? And I just said, listen, he has done an unbelievable job. I mean, absolutely fantastic. And I did. Well, I think he did. On the limited finances, and that's what they're always going to be up against. When you've got now all your big clubs with all the money coming in. But it was funny. I saw Sean Dyche because Sean Dyche's son plays for Northampton Town.
Yeah.
And before I went back to Arlesey, I used to do the players' lounge every home game at Northampton because it's only 40 minutes away from here. So I would just go in there and just chat and do whatever. And then we played a game earlier this season, and Sean was actually sat behind me. And because somebody said, "Oh, Sean Dyche is sitting behind," and I just at half time, I turned around. I said, "Sean, can I have a couple of words?" He said, "Yeah, of course." I said who I was. He said, "Oh, hi, Phil." Yeah, he said, I just want to say at the Chelsea game, I did a chat with Veronica, and I just said what a fantastic job you did, And he said, "Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you."
Yeah.
And then now he's back in the game, isn't he?
He is. I think what he did at Burnley was I mean we've had the big names in like Vincent Companies, but Sean's contribution to Burnley Football Club is incredible. He kind of created a platform for us. And others will say that there was people before him like Owen Coyle, but Sean Dyche has definitely left a legacy in his name at the club, and I think just stopping maybe short of a statue. I think he deserves all the praise and accolades he gets, and I'm delighted he's doing well at Forest.
Yeah,
I
very
think
good.
all Burnley fans would say the same.
And he's still the pub's still there, isn't it? The Royal Dyche.
Yeah, still there. Yeah. What about wingers, Phil? Just before we finish, I mean, there's some. I mean, a player that stood out for me in the early days of getting back in the Premiership was Eden Hazard. I was I don't think I've ever seen a player that good at Burnley. Who players kind of float your boat at the minute?
Um, like sort of like anybody, anything that's sort of exciting. Anybody who's I think like the likes of Saka and people like that.
Mm.
A couple of the Man City boys. I think they've all got, even Newcastle have got, with Anthony Gordon, but he's been now getting a little bit of stick.
Mm.
Because that's my team, Newcastle. And what's his name's just coming back, who I like, the guy that signed from Forest. Um,
At Newcastle.
yeah, the
Oh
winger.
yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. I can't remember, but I
Yeah,
can see him. But yeah,
but yeah, I just like any sort of exciting players. I like the new centre forward at Newcastle, the German guy.
yeah. He's a good big guy, isn't he? Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's so that, and also now they've got the squads. I mean, managers moan about some of the time that they're playing too many games now and again, and I think when in the old days you had one sub, and you had a limited amount of one sub, and that was it. Whereas
yeah,
now, they've got what I don't know, you have about 10 subs now,
yeah. It's crazy, isn't it?
and they're all getting great money. But again, it is some people used to say, oh, it's a disgrace how much these players are getting. And I've said, listen, I said, if you had a son or a daughter who was especially gifted and could play, whatever it be, golf, tennis, cricket, and they could go on and earn crazy money that people are happy to pay, then
Yeah,
that's life,
it
That's
is. It
yeah,
is.
you
Well,
know.
Phil, it's been great. It's been great getting you on. I know. Burnley fans will enjoy this trip down memory lane, just talking about some of those great players. We didn't even mention the likes of like Peter Noble and Bob Lord and all
Yeah,
those
yeah,
guys.
yeah, all them, yeah. And I mean, I'm still a lot of friends with a lot of people on Facebook, Burnley supporters,
Yeah,
and they still say some nice things, which is, at the end of the day, I wasn't the greatest, I wasn't the worst, but I was happy, I was good enough to obviously play. And I think anybody, I hate when people criticize players, and sometimes on Facebook, oh, he was rubbish, he was, let's be, he played professional football.
yeah.
You can't play any professional sport if yeah, somewhat better than others. That's life.
I think you're right. I think some people. I mean, I've been a ref, Phil, and doing quite a lot of trials matches down the turf at Gawthorpe. I, you know, I it always strikes me that to be a professional level at any standard, you've got to be blooming good,
Oh,
because a lot of guys just fall by the wayside and just never make it. So, all power to your elbow, Phil. You've had a career in football, something that many people can only dream of.
that's true.
Yeah. Well, it's lovely chatting to you,
Yeah, anytime,
mate.
anytime. Keep in touch.
Thanks
Talk
ever
to
so much for
talk.
coming on, and I hope people enjoy this. Check it out. There's a plethora of ex-Burnley pros on the Godcast podcast, so check it out. And Phil, thanks for coming on.
Brilliant. Thank you. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Thank you.